Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lake Norman. All are welcome here regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, economic status, or ability. We are a liberal and open faith community, and we are committed to acting our faith in acts of compassion and justice. We travel different paths to get to our truth. I've been a member for about 2 years now, and I would like right now to light our flaming chalice. This chalice represents our search for truth. In our search for truth, may we be just, and in our search for justice, may we be loving. And now I have a couple of readings that I think you will enjoy that represent to me what this faith is about. I would rather have strong enemies than a world of passive individuals. In a world of passive individualists, nothing seems worth anything simply because nobody stands for anything. That world has no convictions, no victories, no unions, no heroism, no absolutes, no heartbeat. That world has rigor mortis. That is by Chris Jamie, who is a philosopher, author, poet, musician. And now, despite my firm convictions, I have been always a man who tries to face facts and to accept the reality of life as new experience and new knowledge unfolds it. I've always kept an open mind, which is necessary to the flexibility that must go hand in hand with every form of intelligent search for truth. And that is from Malcolm X's autobiography. Today we're welcoming Reverend Claudia Jimenez, who has come here before and presented a wonderful talk about imperfection. She is the Minister of Faith Development of the Unitarians in Asheville. She's taught in Colombia, Brazil, Canada, and Florida. Today she's going to speak about Reverend Carolyn Bartlett Crane, who was shunned by the Boston patriarchy in the 1800s, but succeeded through resilience and perseverance. So I hope you will enjoy her as we did last year. In addition, we are going to be having Mike Alec sing for us. And then I hope you'll return and find out about our community.
Good morning, buenos dias, or buenas tardes, good afternoon. It is good to be with you again using this virtual medium to stay connected. I hope you are well. Spring is here. Many are getting vaccinated, and slowly we are emerging from our homes. Thank you for the invitation to share a little Unitarian Universalist history today, especially with it being Women's History Month. You will hear about a little known minister, Carolyn Bartlett Crane. So I invite you to travel to the frontier to 1887 in Sioux Falls, what was then Dakota Territory. A young girl named Queenie accompanies her mother to service. And as she and her brother settle into their pews, a visiting minister takes his place in the pulpit. Unable to contain her surprise, Queenie exclaims, "Why, Mama, there's a man in the pulpit." "Shh," her brother says. "Yes, Queenie, men do preach sometimes." This story is told by Carolyn Bartlett Crane of a pulpit exchange she arranged at her first church. Today, women comprise approximately 60% of Unitarian Universalist ministers. But in the late 19th century, there were few Unitarian or Universalist women ministers in the United States. Both denominations refused to defy traditional gender roles, allowing very few women into ministry. Many women worked behind the scenes without title or pay. If women felt called to ministry, overcame the obstacles to a theological education, and became ministers, finding a job was difficult. And so, despite grueling conditions and low pay, some women could be found ministering to small, unstable congregations on the frontier, jobs their male counterparts would not take. So, who was Carolyn Bartlett Crane? I think if she were alive today, her Twitter handle would be at Notorious CBC. Carolyn Bartlett Crane was, or actually, Carolyn Julia Bartlett Crane is her married name, was born in Wisconsin in 1858. At an early age, she questioned church dogma. She wondered how God could inflict pain arbitrarily or send unbaptized babies or unbelievers to hell. She also questioned the concept of the resurrection. Her doubts and interests in ministry were ignored or rebuked. Her family encouraged her education, hoping she would outgrow that desire to become a minister. Crane attended college and graduated at the top of her class. Again, she raised the issue of ministry, and again, her father said no. She worked as a teacher and a journalist and persisted in her desire to study ministry until her father finally said yes. Caroline studied independently, mentored by Unitarian and Universalist progressive ministers. Her first ministry was at All Souls Church in Sioux Falls. Later, she was called to serve the First Church in Kalamazoo, Michigan, a church that was losing membership after a period of congregational conflict. Now, Crane was intrigued by this church. It was a dying church, not many members. However, she lived in a time where Kalamazoo was facing a lot of challenges, and she wondered if her ministry could be supportive and could help affect change during that time. So Kalamazoo was a city without resources to deal with the growing population of folks living with homelessness, a lot of disease, and a lot of juvenile delinquency that were present as industrialization, immigration, and urbanization transformed America. Crane saw it as an opportunity to expand her ministry beyond the church walls. She was influenced by the social gospel movement that emerged in the late 1880s. The growth of the cities created deplorable conditions, shining a light on the plight of the poor. The need for services, education, and spiritual sustenance was pervasive. Leaders of the social gospel movement advocated Christian engagement to address the oppressive living conditions of workers. It led to questioning theologies that ignored the poor. The social gospel inspired Crane to imagine a church relevant to its time, serving the community regardless of race or creed, 7 days a week. Crane wrote that there was no church so small, so weak, or so isolated that it can't not and ought not find a work of love to do. She recalled members telling her the church only needed a minister to perform funerals. Some members were reluctant to embrace a female minister, but her intelligence, preaching, and organizational skills eclipsed the issue of gender as the church grew under her leadership. Her sermons expanded the definition of church and inspired community engagement. Crane stated that once the congregation started to grow, even the dear old people concluded not to die for a while, but to stay and work in the church. Imagine that. Crane revitalized the religious education program, added a midweek service, and encouraged study clubs. For example, there was a unity study club that researched the city's sewage, water supply, and education to better understand the challenges in their community. Crane challenged her congregation to work for the common good as well as for personal spiritual growth. Her definition of a spiritual person was ahead of her time. She said it was one who believes, reveres, and serves the good, what others call God. This idea anticipates the Unitarian Universalist emphasis on doing good rather than focusing on creeds. That idea of deeds, not creeds, which I'm sure you've heard of in our faith. Community outreach mobilized the Kalamazoo Church during Crane's ministry, so much that in 1893, a wealthy member donated funds for a larger building to serve the community. The following year, the People's Church was dedicated. Crane proposed a name change to reflect its inclusive nature, and today it is still called People's Church of Kalamazoo. This new church included a kindergarten classroom, a gym for women, a literacy club in partnership with the Black community, and vocational programs. Now, Crane was careful not to duplicate services provided by existing organizations. Crane wrote, "The chief function of the Seventh-day Church was to inaugurate good works which ought to be carried on at public charge, but for which the public had not yet assumed responsibility." And in actuality, the kindergarten and vocational schools that were started at People's Church were so popular in the community that the school district ended up taxing itself so that they could open in the public schools similar programs, kindergarten and vocational programs. That's pretty cool to be so ahead of the curve when it came to those types of opportunities for children and youth. So Crane preached. She breathed life into and revived a dwindling congregation by inspiring a sense of responsibility, by appealing to conscience and to the logical extension of Unitarian and Universalist values, calling community into action. Her call to action beyond the walls of the church had meaningful and lasting impacts in the city of Kalamazoo. So, how can Carolyn Bartlett Crane's story inspire us today? Unitarian Universalist congregations can provide opportunities for spiritual discernment and sustenance that supports the work of living our values in the world, like Carolyn Bartlett Crane did in the Frontier. Her response to the societal challenges of her time was ministry beyond the walls of the church, whose buildings served the community 7 days a week, and a theology rooted in goodliness, not godliness. Today, a pandemic has forced us to gather virtually. When we are able to return to our buildings, how are we called to respond to the challenges of our time? White supremacy culture, economic inequity, and a deeply divided nation. How will Unitarian Universalist congregations come back? How will we use our buildings? Hoping to return to a pre-COVID normal that was toxic and abusive to so many should not be an option. How will our congregations be places to heal from the trauma and grief of the pandemic and the recent threats to our democracy? What conversations do we need to have to discover what matters to our community and how we can be allies or accomplices in justice work? Because we know this pandemic has shown us the results of so much inequity among people of the global majority who suffered more, disproportionately more than others because they didn't have the health care and the economic wherewithal to be resilient, or as resilient as they could during the pandemic, and especially women who are caregivers and have had to lose time at work and be at home full time to take care of their children. So there is a lot for us to think about. What conversations do we need to have is part of that question, I think, of coming back to church. And it's also a time for reimagining how we do church. Now that digital ministry has been a part of church for the last year, what will a hybrid in-person and online church be like? Is it something that we will continue, or will it become a thing of the past? How many new people have you met beyond your local community that are tuning into your services, and how will you maintain that engagement with them? So many questions and possibilities. I think that if Crane could succeed in a small frontier town in the 1880s, we can only imagine what a UU congregation could do in 2021. So, my friends, it is my hope that you and all our Unitarian Universalist congregations realize the power of our collective agency and our ability to embrace the possibilities of ministry in a world slowly emerging from the physical isolation caused by the pandemic. In doing so, may we come closer to that long-held goal of a beloved community where all are welcomed and are able to live to their potential. As you leave this time that we have shared, I invite you to consider, what have you learned during this pandemic time? And how will you be different in the world? As a Unitarian Universalist, as a friend, as a mother, as a father, and so on. What have we learned? And what can we do to create a world of equity and justice where all thrive to their potential? That is our challenge. May we take it on. Good luck, friends.
Greetings, everyone. Happy spring. This is a song about pushing on through. Oh, leave it all behind you, baby. We gotta roll tonight. Take these chains of yesterday, yeah, keep them out of sight. Somewhere in the dark horizon, past your naked eyes, further than tomorrow, further than these starlit skies. Hey, don't look past your shoulder, the future's slipping by. Ain't no signs between the lines, it's down to do or die. Listen to the raging river, got no time to lose. You know you got no time to wander down to the burning fuse. Oh, through these flashing cities, the canyons deep and wide, straight across the heartland to the rising mountainside. Keep the wind behind you, there's good sun upon the day, shining down forever, it'll take us all the way. And Don't look past your shoulder, the future's slipping by. Ain't no signs between the lines, it's down to do or die. Listen to that raging river, got no time to lose. No, you got no time to wander. Time is the burning fuse. Yes, it is. One more time. Take care, everyone. Happy spring.
Thank you, Reverend Claudia, and come more often. And Mike, thanks very much for your music, and it makes life enjoyable. Okay, so if you look down at the bottom of this page, you're going to see the name of Linda Heidenberg. She is our Director of Membership. If you're interested in finding out a little more about us, we love to have you visit, and you can get in touch with Linda. She will give you a little bit more information about us. Okay, thank you all for coming, and I wish you a wonderful day. Please go in peace.